Chapter 9 of The Practice of the Love of Jesus Christ, based by St. Alphonsus Ligouri. Love is not boastful. Those who love Jesus Christ are not vain about their own worth, but humble themselves and are glad to be humbled by others. The proud person is like a balloon filled with air, which seems great to itself, but whose whole greatness in reality comes down to a little wind, which, as soon as the balloon is opened, is quickly dissipated. Those who love God are humble and are not puffed up by seeing any worth in themselves, because they know that whatever they have is a gift of God, and that of themselves they have only nothingness and sin. Thus the knowledge of the divine favors bestowed on them humbles them all the more, seeing how unworthy they are and yet so favored by God. And speaking of the special favors she received from God, St. Teresa says, "God treats me as if I were a house that is about to tumble down. He props me up." When souls receive a loving visit from God and feel an unusual warmth of divine love, accompanied with tears or great tenderness of heart, let them beware of supposing that the Lord is favoring them in reward for some good deed. Instead, they should humble themselves all the more and think that God cherishes them in order that they may not forsake him. Otherwise, were they to flatter themselves because of such favors, imagining themselves more privileged because they were on better terms with God than others, such a fault would make God deprive them of his favors. The two things most necessary to hold a house together are the foundation and the roof. The foundation in us must be humility, and acknowledging that we are good for nothing and capable of nothing, and the roof is God's help, in which alone we ought to put our trust. Whenever we see ourselves more favored by God, we must humble ourselves that much more. When St. Teresa received some special grace, she strove to keep before her eyes all the faults she had ever committed, and thus the Lord bound her more closely to himself. The more souls confess themselves undeserving of any favors, the more God enriches them with his grace. Thais, who was first a sinner and then a saint, humbled herself so profoundly before God that she thought herself unworthy even of naming him. So she did not even dare to say, "My God," but "My Creator, have mercy on me." And St. Jerome writes that thanks to such humility, she saw a glorious throne prepared for her in heaven. Likewise, in the life of St. Margaret of Cortona, we read that when our Lord visited her one day with greater tenderness and love, she exclaimed, "But, O Lord, how can this be? Have you forgotten what I was? How is it that you repay all my insults against you with so much delicate attention?" And God replied that when a soul loves him and repents of having offended him, he forgets all her past offenses. As he said through Ezekiel, "But if the wicked turn away from all their sins, none of the transgressions that they have committed shall be remembered against them." And in proof of this, he showed her a high throne, which he had prepared for her in heaven in the midst of the seraphim. If only we could understand the value of humility. A single act of humility is worth more than all the riches in the world. St. Teresa used to say, "Don't think that you have made progress in perfection until you consider yourself the worst of all, unless you desire to be placed at last, and unless you desire to be placed last." And that is what the saint did, as all the other saints have done. St. Francis of Assisi, St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi, and the rest considered themselves the greatest sinners in the world, and were surprised that the earth bore them up, rather than opening beneath their feet, and they said so with sincere conviction. The Venerable Father John of Avila, who had led a holy life from his youth, had a priest come to assist him on his deathbed. The priest said some quite sublime things to him, treating him as the great servant of God and great divine that he was. But Father Avila told him, "Father, I beg you pray for my soul, as one prays for the soul of a criminal condemned to death, for that is what I am." This was the estimation that the saints have of themselves in life and death. We too must act this way if we wish to be saved and keep ourselves in God's grace until death, putting all our trust in God alone. The proud rely on their own strength, and so they fall. But the humble, by trusting God alone, stand firm and never fall. even when they are assaulted by the most violent temptations. Their watchword is, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." The devil at one time tempts us to presumption, at another time to despair. When he tells us that we are in no danger of falling, then let us tremble all the more, because if for one instant God were not to help us with his grace, we would be lost. When the devil tempts us to despair, then let us turn to God and say with great confidence, "In you, O Lord, I seek refuge. Do not let me ever be put to shame." My God, in you I have placed all my hope. I hope I have never to see myself confounded or bereft of your grace. We ought to make these acts of distrust in ourselves and trust in God up to the very last moment of our life, always begging God to grant us holy humility. But in order to be humble, it is not enough to have a lowly opinion of ourselves and to consider ourselves the wretches that we are. The person who is truly humble, says Thomas à Kempis, looks down on himself and wishes to be looked down on by others. That is what Jesus Christ recommends, following his example. "Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart." Those who call themselves the greatest sinners in the world and then get angry when others despise them plainly show that their humility is only on their tongue, not in their heart. St. Thomas Aquinas says that a person who resents being slighted may be sure that he is a long way from perfection, even if he were to work miracles. The Divine Mother sent St. Ignatius Loyola to instruct St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi in humility. And here is the lesson that the saint gave her. Humility is the enjoyment of whatever leads us to despise ourselves. Note well, it is an enjoyment. If our senses are hurt by the scorn we receive, we must at least enjoy them with the Spirit. And how could a soul who loves Jesus Christ, seeing how much God has endured as he suffered in his passion? Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him. How could that soul not love being scorned? That is why our Redeemer wanted his image exhibited on our altars, representing him not in glory but nailed to the cross, that we might constantly have before our eyes the ignominy he suffered. A sight that made the saints rejoice to see themselves despised in this world. And such was the request that St. John of the Cross made of Jesus Christ, when Jesus appeared to him with the cross upon his shoulder. "O Lord, let me suffer and be despised for you. My Lord, as I see you thus despised for my love, I ask of you only to make me suffer and be despised for your love." St. Francis de Sales says, "To put up with infamy is the touchstone of humility and of true virtue. If a person claiming to be spiritual engages in prayer, frequent communion, fasts, and mortification, and yet cannot put up with an affront or a biting word, what does that tell us? It shows that this person is a hollow reed, without humility and without virtue. And what can souls do who love Jesus Christ if they cannot endure a slight for the love of him who endured so many slights for them?" Thomas à Kempis, in his golden book, The Imitation of Christ, writes as follows: "Since you have such a horror of being humiliated, that is a sign that you are not dead to the world, that you have no humility, and that you do not keep God before your eyes. Those who do not have God before their eyes are disturbed by every word of blame that they hear. You cannot endure blows and wounds for God. Endure at least a few words. Indeed, what surprise and scandal are caused by people who are frequent communicants and yet who are quick to resent every scornful word? On the other hand, what fine edification a soul gives who, when greeted with scorn, answers gently to conciliate the offensive individual, or perhaps makes no reply at all, nor complains to others, but maintains a placid expression and shows no bitterness. St. John Chrysostom says that the meek are beneficial not just to themselves, but to others as well, because of the good example they give of gentleness in the face of contempt. On this topic, Kempis mentions a number of areas in which we should practice humility. He writes, "What others say will get a hearing. What you will say will be disparaged. Others will ask for something and get it. You will ask and be refused. Others will be loudly praised by their colleagues, and you will be passed over in silence. This or that assignment will be conferred on others, while you will be judged as good for nothing. The Lord uses such trials to test his faithful servants to see how they have learned to control themselves and to stay calm. At times, human nature will protest, but you will profit greatly if you bear it all in silence. St. Jane Frances de Chantal used to say, when those who are truly humble receive a humiliation, they humble themselves even more. Indeed, because those who are truly humble never think that they have been humiliated as much as they deserve. Those who can behave this way are called blessed by Jesus Christ. He does not call blessed people who are esteemed, honored, and praised as noble, learned, or powerful, but the ones who are spoken ill of by the world, who are persecuted and calumniated. For these, if only they bear it all with patience, there has been prepared a great reward in paradise. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. The chief occasion for practicing humility is when we are rebuked for some fault by superiors or others. Some people are like hedgehogs. When no one touches them, they seem quite placid and gentle, but no sooner does a superior or a friend lay a hand on them, admonishing them about something they have done badly, then they suddenly become all prickles and bitingly reply that it isn't true, or that they were right to act as the way they did, or that such a correction is uncalled for. In a word, anyone who reproves them becomes their enemy. They behave like the people who accuse the surgeon for causing them pain while treating their wound. He is angry with the doctor, writes St. Bernard. When holy and humble people are corrected, says St. John Chrysostom, they grieve for the mistake they have made. By contrast, upon receiving correction, proud people grieve too, but they grieve because their faults have been found out. And so they are troubled. They answer back and are furious at the persons who correct them. Here is the golden rule cited by St. Philip Neri for those receiving corrections. Anyone who would really become a saint must never excuse himself, even when the accusation is false. The one exception to this rule is when self-defense seems to be necessary to avoid scandal. Souls earn great rewards from God when they keep silent and do not make excuses, even if wrongfully accused. St. Teresa said, sometimes a soul makes more progress and acquires greater perfection by not offering excuses than by listening to 10 sermons. Because by not hiding behind excuses, the soul begins to win freedom of spirit and to stop caring whether people speak well or ill of her. Prayers of love and affection. Incarnate Word, I beg you, by the merits of your holy humility, which led you to embrace so many ignominies, and insults for your love, free me from all pride and grant me a share of that humility. And how could I ever complain of any affront to myself, especially after I have so often deserved hell? My Jesus, by the merit of all the scorn you endured for me in your passion, grant me the grace to live and die humbled on this earth, as you live and died humbled for my sake. For your love I would willingly be despised and forsaken by everyone, but without you I can do nothing. I love you, my sovereign good. I love you, beloved of my soul. I love you, and I hope, and this is my purpose, to suffer everything for you, insults, betrayals, persecutions, afflictions, dryness, and desolation, as long as you do not abandon me. My soul's only beloved, never again let me wander away from you. Give me the desire to please you, give me fervor in loving you, give me peace of mind in suffering, give me resignation in everything that goes against me. Have mercy on me, I deserve nothing, but I hope for everything from you, who bought me with your blood. And I hope for everything from you, my Queen and my Mother, Mary, the refuge of sinners.